Hey everyone, welcome back to our Xcode SwiftUI series, and today we're going to be looking at how you can add your API keys in Xcode securely and safely, as well as how you can upload them to GitHub without risking leaking your API key to the whole world. I'm going to be using WeatherAPI in this example, but for your purposes, if you're using a different API that requires a key and sign up and things like that, you can apply this to your needs. Otherwise, I'm going to be starting with a new Xcode project. I'm going to show you how to safely and securely add the API keys to your project. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So I'm going to create a new project here. I'm going to create a new app template, and I'm using SwiftUI. I'm just going to call mine API key hiding, interface SwiftUI, language Swift, testing system and storage on none. Go ahead and set this up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an Xcode config file for all of our secrets, not the ones that you put in your diary, but for our API keys, right? And we're going to make sure that the Xcode config file is not tracked by Git, because we can very easily and safely add this to things like our .GitIgnore. So to create this file, we're going to be creating a new one from template, and it should be under the other files here. You might want to search for it, or you can just scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to be choosing the configuration settings file. Otherwise, feel free to filter it. Let's go ahead and just call this one our secrets. So this is what I'll do in some projects that have API keys or things that I don't want the public to be accessing. Let's go ahead and create that. You can even see that the configuration settings file format has documentation, and there's even a link for it. Otherwise, we can kind of think of this as like an Info.plist, where we'll essentially create some text and have it equal something. So for my case of using the WeatherAPI key, I'm going to name it appropriately. So I'm going to do weather_API_key, and we can have this equals what our API key actually is. So whatever it actually is, your real key would go here. For your purposes, replace this information with the key. Obviously, if you leave it as your real key goes here, it's not going to work. So whatever you get from your API, you're going to want to paste it under the equals. And we're going to be using our interpolation later on to pass that information wherever it needs to go in case of a URL or somewhere else. Next, I would create a new empty file here. So this will just create a Swift file. And let's go ahead and call this one secrets decoder. Not really a decoder, but this is how we're going to read the API key securely using the info dictionary. So we're going to first import foundation, then we're going to create an enum, and we'll call this one secrets. Add a brace here, and we'll create a static variable, and we'll call this one WeatherAPI key, and this is going to be a string value. I'm going to add our brace here. We'll do a guard let statement to prevent any crashes, and we'll do a key which equals the Bundle.main.info dictionary. We're going to use a question mark, we're going to use our square brackets, and we're going to reference our weather_API_key. Make sure it's spelled the exact same way that it is in your secrets Xcode config file. Outside of the square brackets, we'll do an as question mark string. We'll create an else, and this is where you can handle any errors. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and do a fatal error, and I'm going to have this basically say that the WeatherAPI key is not found. It's not actually in the Info.plist at this time, so you can even say like check secrets.xcconfig, and this is actually just going to like completely crash out of the program. Then we're going to go ahead and return the key. Kind of like, I like to think of this as like my decoder / doesn't work, I'm crashing and getting out of there. Another step we have to take is we need to click on our app project here, and we're going to make sure we're on the project tab here, and under the info you'll see that we have configurations, debug, and release. For right now, just under the debug, we're going to set this to be the secrets.xconfig file we've created. This is going to allow the secrets to be accessed through Xcode. Okay, so how do we obtain our key? So depending on what API you are using, A lot of these are things that you can sign up for with an email. If you're using a really large API and you have a lot of callbacks, you might have to actually pay for this, but your API key is your own. You can use it to make a certain amount of calls a month, or you can use it to track very specific data. So I'm going to be using the WeatherAPI.com. Link is in the description below. And I'm going to be signing up and we'll be using their documentation today. So I'm just going to quickly go through all the steps. Cool. This one just requires an account verification, so I'm going to grab that from my email. Cool. Now that I'm signed up, we can see here that I have a trial that ends on this date. You can see that's live, and I have an API key. On your end, this thing is blurred, but this is what we're going to go ahead and copy. And in our Xcode project, under secrets, where it says your real API key goes here, I'm going to go ahead and paste this key. On your end, it's blurred, yay! But you should be pasting whatever your API key is there. Again, from different APIs, you're going to have different keys and codes and things like that. Do not share this with anybody unless you're working on a project with them or something, but this should be your specific API key. So one more step, we need to first expose our key to the app at runtime. So I'm going to click on my app file. I'm going to go to info. I'm going to go to URL types. I'm going to press the plus button. And this is a really quick way to open up your app's Info.plist file. What we're going to do is we're going to press the plus button here, and we're going to add a new key. We'll call it weather_API_key. We'll hit return, and under the value, we're going to do $ bracket weather, all caps here, weather_API_key, or whatever you had called yours. So this is going to tell Xcode to read the variable from our Xcode configuration file. Okay, we're going to create a new empty file here, and this is where we're going to be handling our weather view model. So I would first import foundation, and I would create a class. In this case, this will be my weather view model, and this is actually going to conform to an observable object. And we're going to actually have a @published variable, which is going to be the temperature. This is going to be a string value, and we're just going to have this with a default of loading ... just in case the user's internet's slow or the API's taken up a little bit of extra time. So how do we know what we can grab from the API? Well, every single API is a little bit different, and we can see here we have different values like max temp, min temp, things like that. I would always double check any documentation that you can find, typically on the either GitHub for the API or on the website. So in this case, on WeatherAPI, there we have this docs tab here. And we can kind of scroll down and we can see all of the different requests, all the different methods and the parameters and things like that. So depending on what API you're using, this is where I would find all the information about what you want to grab. So in our case, let's go ahead and fetch some weather. We'll have like things like a city, and then we can grab the weather from there. Let's go ahead and create a function. We'll call this one fetch weather. Apple Intelligence is in my head apparently. They're listening to me. Let's go ahead and establish a city, and we're gonna have this just be London for now. Then we'll go ahead and establish our key. So this is going to equal our secrets dot weather API key. So this is how we can really safely and securely have that key. Then we're going to go ahead and grab the URL str. We're going to have it equal the API weather API one. So if we go back to our documentation and website, we can see that we have a request URL, and it also has the little key parameter here. Let's go ahead and copy this, put it in our string here, and then we can even see the other API methods here. So in my case, I'm looking at the current weather of the city. So I'm going to grab the /current.json. Let's go back to Xcode. Let's go ahead and paste that. Now we are going to need to provide it with a key. So we're going to use the question mark key. Then we're going to use string interpolation in order to add our key, which is that key from our secrets there. Then we can also see on our request parameters, we have the key, perfect. And then we have a queue, which is also required. And we can see that this is representing a query, and let's say we're doing a city name. So it's going to be q equals and then Paris, but we're going to be providing with the city. So I'm just going to take the q equals and we'll do q equals. And then we're going to go ahead and also string interpolate the city of London. This is great if you have these variables being handled by things like user interaction. We should be good to go. Let's go ahead and close off that string. And this is how we can add both the key as well as the city within the API. If you want to do more things, check the kind of documentation here. It has lots of great examples. Every single API I work with always has really great documentation, whether it's on a website or GitHub page or something like that, and they often have sample projects too. Okay, back in Xcode, we can go ahead and kind of spruce up our function a little bit more. I want this app to be a little bit more functional. We're going to create a guardlet with our URL, which is going to equal the URL. Then we're going to have our string, which is the URL string value we created above, else, add a brace, and we'll have our temperature equal invalid URL. And then we'll go ahead and still within this brace, we'll then return. Okay, now outside of this brace, so we should have like 2 braces at the bottom here. We're going to be handling different things for decoding our JSON. So I'm going to be doing our URL session.shared.data task with URL. We're going to be doing lowercase. We're then going to be having our data, comma, underscore, comma, error in. These are all things I've done with JSON and APIs before, so I might go a little bit fast. If let error equals error, add our brace, dispatch q.main.async. We're going to do the one with the code here, and we're just going to have our self.temperature result back in an error. And then we're going to use string interpolation to kind of print and display that error. So we'll do the error.localized description. After this brace, we'll go ahead and return. After this if let, we're going to go ahead and create a guardlet, which is going to be our data, and it's going to equal data else. So we're just basically doing a lot of error handling here. Dispatch q.main.async with the code, and this is where we'll say that we haven't received any data. So self.temperature equals no data received. Go ahead and return after that as well. After the guardlet, we're going to go ahead and say if let decoded equals try question mark JSON decoder. We'll do the dot decode. Let's do the type and from. So for the type, this is going to be the weather response dot self, and the data is going to be from the data. Weather response is a structure that we're going to be making in just a couple seconds. So if it doesn't know where it is, that's why. We'll then add a brace. I'm just going to scroll up here so it's a little bit easier to see. Once again, do our dispatch q.main.async, add our brace here. And here's where we'll have our self.temperature once again. So it'll equal a decoded current temp. I think it's in Celsius. Let's hope it is. C, and then we'll do in, and we're also going to have the decoded dot location dot name. Wonderful. And after the brace here of the dispatch queue main async, let's go ahead and add an else. Open this up, and we'll have our good friend dispatch queue dot main dot async. Add a brace again, and this is where we'll handle the self.temperature equals failed to load. All right, let's do decode response. Great, and then we're going to move down 2 braces to this one at the end of the URL session. I'm going to add our dot, resume with the brackets, and then we're going to create our structure here for our weather response. This is something that's going to be decodable. We'll add a brace here, and we'll have a struct of location. Make it decodable as well. Add a brace, and we'll say let name be a string. create another struct here. We'll call it current, which is also going to be decodable. Add a brace again. Let temp_c be a double. All this information is found on the documentation as well. Then we're going to create two lets. The first one, location, which is going to conform to the location we just created, and the current, which is going to conform to the current that we also created. So this is how we're handling all the JSON data coming in. Different APIs are going to have different requirements on the way they're being handled. Now let's go to the content view. We'll make a really quick user interface for the user. We're going to make a user interface super basic. You can make this as beautiful you want in your own app. And we're going to do a add state object of a private var. And it's going to be our view model, which is going to equal the weather view model. Then within our placeholder vstack here, let's go ahead and add some text. We can just say like weather or something. You can add like emojis. It's up to you. And let's have a really big font. Let's do the .system size. And let's set this to be 60, make it large and in charge here. And then to actually display the text, we're going to do text, and then we're going to reference our view model .temperature. We can see here that it is loading still. Let's set this font to be title, I guess that should work. But this should be pretty good to go. What I would also do is on the padding, I would add a dot on appear right after with some braces, and I would say view model dot fetch weather. So whenever the view loads, then we should be good to go. And here we have the localized description, which says the resource could not be loaded because the app transport security policy requires the use of a secure connection. So maybe this means for this particular API, we have to run it in the simulator. Let's go ahead and test it out. If you also want to add a button here, we can call this one refresh. Get a brace here, and we can have our view model dot fetch weather also in here. Okay, let's try this on the simulator. If not, we can go ahead and pop it on our phone. Oh, I guess it's because this is HTTP and it's not HTTPS. Okay, now that we've made it HTTPS, which is weird, it wasn't already HTTPS. Okay, interesting. Okay, now we can see our weather in London and we can refresh it. We should be all good to go there. Main purpose of this one wasn't so much about the API call itself, but about that secrets Xcode config. If someone looks at this, right, and they look at your code, they just see that you're passing along the secret. They'll never know what that secret is, and they'll have to add their own key here. Now on GitHub, this is where I really recommend adding the .GitIgnore. So what I would recommend doing is in your GitIgnore here, you can do this either on GitHub desktop or on GitHub itself. This is where I would be adding a block for the Xcode configuration file. And you can do this. Let's go ahead and edit this file. You can do that by adding the little asterisk .xcconfig. So this will, if you upload it to GitHub, this will protect all of your secrets. So today we learned how to add secrets using the xconfig file. We linked those secrets within the Info.plist. We added it to the build. We read them safely at runtime, and we built the SwiftUI demo using WeatherAPI. And we protected those secrets from GitHub. This technique keeps your API keys out of your source code and version control. And that's good security, as well as just how to add those API keys as well. So that's everything for today. If you need to reference this file, I will be uploading it to my GitHub, although the secrets, they shouldn't have my API key in it, so you have to add your own. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Dream big, code bigger, and let me know down in the comments below what API you're using or what app you're creating. Otherwise, take care.